Welcome to the Kernel of Truth. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds. I'm here with two special guests today, and we're going to focus in a little bit on Arkansas and some of the things that have been going on concerning CDLs, foreign drivers. Here in America, it's a big problem, and we just found out about this a few months ago. Most people were completely ignorant about what's going on in the trucking industry, and come to find out, it's been a problem. It's been a problem for years, but I didn't know it, and I'm sure you probably didn't either. But my guest today, Shannon Everett, he is the co-founder of the American Truckers United. Now, you have to understand, this whole issue about foreign drivers really originated out of Arkansas. And Shannon is here to help me, along with candidate for Secretary of State, Brian Norris, because we want to know a little bit more about how we can help as far as here in Arkansas and what we can do in order to make our legislators understand they've got to do something now. But anyway, I'd like to turn my attention to Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So we talked a little bit before we started the program about how you got started. Could you kind of let our audience know how you got involved and why you're here where you're at now?
Yeah. So I'm a trucker by heart. I was born into it. You know, I'm a second generation trucker. My sons are in trucking. My dad's in trucking. So that's all I've ever done. Been doing it for 25 years. I've started out with a group of about 50 trucks when I went to work for my dad back in 1999 as a salesman. We grew that fleet up to over 1,000 trucks, sold it off to a public trucking company in 2014. And I stayed on to manage that public operation for 5 years. I call that my prison sentence, working for a publicly traded company. But about the fourth or fifth year into that, you know, we really started to see this kind of take off, and it started with drivers coming out of Mexico and Canada on B1 tourist visas, and so they were abusing tourist and visitor visas and coming into the United States with Mexican CDLs, Mexican trucks, Mexican operating authorities, and competing against our hardworking American truck drivers. And it put us at a huge disadvantage, obviously, because their trucks don't have to have the same emission standards that our trucks have to have. Their drivers don't have to be paid a prevailing wage like our drivers have to be paid. They didn't have to follow wage and hour laws. They didn't have to follow hours of service laws. And so pretty much these guys were all operating like it was the wild, wild west. And for those that don't know, the trucking industry is probably one of the most regulated industries there are, and it should be, rightfully so, because it's a dangerous industry. We're driving 80,000-pound trucks around your families and your kids, and so I don't think that it should be less regulated, but I definitely think everyone should be regulated. Right. And so what we ran into is here you have this new ecosystem of people that have a completely different standard, and of course when that happens, they take over. And so in 2019, right before I left the business, I laid off 400 American truck drivers.
400?
400.
Wow.
And one big layoff. And of course I was upset about that because I knew why. I was voicing my concern to my customer, explaining what the problem was. And I was explaining it to the Trucking Association. And at the time, when this first started in 2019, it really did start as a phenomenon with Mexico and Canada and the USMCA trade agreement. Mm-hmm. They had a huge advantage over us. And so when I do believe that when I first started screaming about it, I was probably one of the only ones screaming. And that's because my business was so heavily concentrated in cross-border business. My primary customers were General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, Peterbilt. So I was hauling car parts into assembly plants for North American production, and so I had high exposure to this. And so I had a unique perspective because I was the first one to get hit.
You were
Right.
the bellwether.
Yeah, absolutely. I was the bellwether guy. And so being that bellwether guy, I started sending off pulling the fire alarm, like, hey guys, we got a huge problem here. This doesn't make sense. And I went and sat down with Ace Hutchinson. I went and sat down with Tom Cotton. I went and sat down with French Hill. All of our legislators, anybody who was anybody, I went and pled my case. And I quickly got a phone call from the Trucking Association that I was making too much noise. And so, you know, I've learned this, you know, I was telling Conrad before the show here, I've never been very politically engaged obviously as a business leader, I had to be at some level, but not directly involved. Never ran for office, never got involved in party politics or anything like that. But when I had an issue here and I had no representation, I had no choice but to go direct to them and say, hey, what can you do for me? And it was very disappointing for them to say, without the support of the association, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to go up against the trucking association on these issues,
Mm.
And so,
Where's the trucking association headquartered out of?
Little Rock.
Okay.
They're actually they're building. They're based right there in that where the news agencies are, right there in front. I think they call it the Victory Building or something.
Okay.
Like that.
All right. And one last question: the 400 workers, those are all Arkansans.
No. My operation was across the United States.
Okay, got it.
So
So
I think
American citizens.
probably 50 of them were from Arkansas.
Okay.
But yeah, they were all Americans. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the Arkansas Trucking Association calls me in. And they're like, hey, you're making a lot of noise. Their exact words were, we've been getting a lot of phone calls about you going around and you're going to knock down a wasp nest, not even wasp spray. And I'm sitting in the office. It's just this is a one-on-one conversation with the leader. And now, mind you, one of the chairman of the association at the time was involved in the driver stuff and all this with these drivers. And so it was very complicated, very touchy. But anyway, I get this message and I was like, well, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to take that, but this is my livelihood. This is my family's livelihood. This is all these truck drivers' livelihood, and this matters. So I'm going to keep fighting for this. I'm not one to kind of be be run off typically. And so I did. I kept raising alarm on the issue, and in May of 2020, I got a death threat, and it was about probably 6 or 7 months after I got that warning to leave it alone, and so it's like, wow, I guess that's what they meant. I wasn't really sure how to take all of that, but I can tell you that it was a very traumatizing experience for me. I'd never been through anything like that, and I felt like it was very real, and so I put the issue down. It run me off of the issue. I put it down for several months, didn't touch it, and ended up buying into another business. Thought, okay, maybe it's just me. Maybe this is something I just need to get away from and just give up on, and I'll go get into a different space. So I bought into a company called Pinnacle Express that specialized in refrigerated regional type freight, hauling, frozen meats, fresh vegetables, stuff like that. And there was a lot of my peers in the industry were in that type of space, and because it wasn't cross-border, it's like, man, that looks safe. They're still making money. They're not screaming that, hey, this is unfair. And so I'll get off into that and I'll be fine. And I did, and it was fine for a couple of years. And so that was 2020. It was good in 20. It was good in 21. And then in 2022, the second quarter of 2022, the entire trucking industry crashed. And so,
how do we not hear about this?
About the crash?
Joe Blow, average Arkansan, not hearing about an entire American industry collapsing like that.
Well, the trucking industry is pretty cyclical, and so it's a lot like farming. If it was worth doing, they wouldn't let us do it. And so if you've got to spend a lot of capital and risk everything to make a couple of points of margin, then that's what they get all the suckers to do. So all of us farmers and all of us truckers, we've got to go spend $10 million to make $100,000, and it's in that business, we'll have good years where you'll make $1 million, but then you'll have bad years where you'll lose $2 million.
Right.
And so it's very cyclical, and it's a commoditized business, and it's up and down, and so I wouldn't be shocked that you wouldn't hear that, because we have those pretty often. We'll have troughs, but this time it wasn't any normal year. That was 22. So typically those peaks to troughs last about 18 months. So when we enter a downtime like that, we all know you save up for the rainy day and you cut hay when the sun's shining, because that's coming again. And so everybody thought, well, 18 months, we'll be back out of this. Well, 18 months came and we wasn't out of it. In fact, it was intensifying and it was getting worse. And so Harvey Beach, he's a good friend of mine. Trucking's a real small world. I mean, it's big, but it's small, at the leadership level. We all know each other. And so everybody's talking about, like, what is this? Like, what's going on here? What's causing it to be so bad? At the same time, Nobody's talking about GDP crashing. Nobody's talking about industrial production crashing. Like, what's making trucking so bad? If you look back at some of the other dips that we've had, like I lived through '08. I always tell everybody this, like '08 was bad. Like we almost lost our business at the time. But we also knew what the problem was, right? We knew, because GM was my customer, that because their plants are shut down, we don't have anything to haul. But when their plants come back up, we're good.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case this time. Everybody's plants were still running. Everybody's still shipping everything. Just nobody wants to pay us anything. You know, that's a completely different phenomenon. That's a completely different problem. And so as we all start talking about, like, how are we going to come out of this? Because so that's 22, so now it's 24, and me and our friend, we're all talking about, like, there's no end in sight here. In fact, it just keeps intensifying. It keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and it's building up. Then there was a crash, and so there was a crash of Scott Miller in Colorado. Big crash. Scott was a truck driver, and Scott was in his personal vehicle at the time when a truck being driven by an illegal alien who had been deported 16 times, was under deportation orders at the time that he hit and killed Scott, made national news. And I remember, like a week before that, I've got a little prayer team that meets. We were meeting every morning at the time, and one of those ladies on the team is my cleaning lady. And she didn't know my story about what I'd gone through in 2020. I'd never shared with her about my cave time, but she come in one morning I've got this in my journal, May 13th, 2024. And she said, I've got a word for you. She said, you're running from something. And the reason the seas are so rough and the times are so bad in trucking is because you didn't go to Nineveh. You were supposed to go to Nineveh and you didn't go to Nineveh. And that just, it shook me to the core, because I had been praying with my son that, man, I think I'm supposed to pick this issue back up. And I had asked my son specifically the week before, son, will you be praying if I'm supposed to step out there again and do this again?
Yeah, the issue specifically of foreign drivers, yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
And so he said, yes, Dad, I'll be praying with you. So we were praying that weekend that God would give us a clear sign that I was supposed to go do this again. Mm-hmm. And Monday morning, she gives me that prophetic word, not knowing my story, okay? And so I wrote down in my journal, it's like, okay, I hear you. I'm gonna go do this. It was 2 weeks later, Scott had that crash. And his wife and his daughter are in tears. You can go Google this, Scott Miller crash, Colorado, and you'll see his daughter, Michelle, in tears saying, I can't believe this happened to my daddy. I'm gonna spend the rest of my time trying to fight for laws and regulations to make sure this doesn't happen to somebody else. And so it was at that point that I told Harvey, I was like, we've got to do something. We can't just sit here and not do anything. People, not only is it our livelihoods and our families and our employees, people are being killed. Scott didn't have a choice.
Right, right.
Scott didn't get to choose to fight or to sit still. And so we started American Truckers United in May of 2024. And so we're going to get up and start talking. And the first thing we did was filmed a few videos saying, well, the first thing that we did actually was the Saline County Republican Committee. I went to the committee and I took a resolution and said, can I speak? I want to say you were there one time when I spoke.
I think you were. Mm-hmm.
I want to say you were there when I spoke one time. And they let me speak, and I had the floor, and I was like, do y'all realize that we've got Interstate 30 running right here through Saline County, that there are thousands of truck drivers driving through our town every day that can't read our road signs and that don't have a United States commercial driver's license? They're operating on these digital CDLs from Mexico. And everybody's like, oh, no, like, no. I'm like, yeah, nobody's telling y'all, but they're allowing them to come, they're allowing them to come through our state. Everybody was outraged. Like, that can't be. It absolutely can be. It's happening. And I need y'all to sign this resolution so we can tell our lawmakers we need to do something about it.
Right.
And so it passed unanimously. Like, everybody's like, yeah, of course. Let's do something. That was the women's meeting and the regular committee meeting. Everybody's like outraged. And so it's like, okay.
So that was one committee. Did you go to any other committees?
Oh yeah. I started traveling around. I went to Faulkner County. I went to Pulaski County. Everybody, same thing. Every time I went somewhere, it's like, no, you know. So I realized very quickly, people don't know.
No, of course not. Yeah, they don't.
They don't know this is going on. They don't know they're driving next to all this stuff. And so I get a phone call. It's Trucking Association. And, you know, and so I dropped that. I didn't give them a hard time over what had happened. I didn't even tell them what happened to me in 20. I just went through my cave time. I drawed closer to the Lord. I'm so thankful now that I went through all of that because it made me a better man. It gave me a new relationship with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And so we don't know it when we're going through things like that at the time, but it was the greatest blessing ever happened to me.
Right.
But here they're calling again, and so
Little Rock.
Yeah, Little Rock.
Little Rock.
And they're calling the day after I spoke to Pulaski County.
Okay.
It's like, oh, he's going outside of his town now. He's like, you know, and they're like, hey, we want to talk to you about this soapbox that you're on. And so immediately it's like, golly, here we go again. You know, why has it got to be a soapbox? Why can't it just be we've got an issue, we need to deal with the issue? And they said, we've got legislation, we're working on a bill, you need to come up here and see the bill. And I said, well, I'll pray about it. And, you know, there's this back, and I don't want to get into all that, but, and so I told him I'd pray, and we hung up, we disagreed, had a little disagreement, hung up. I prayed about it that weekend. I sent him an email and said, look, I don't want to come have another one-on-one. I would be more than happy to come present to the board, which is all my peers. It's guys that own trucking companies. I'd love to come talk to the guys. Let me come present to the board. I'll tell them all the facts, and then we'll all talk about it. So, no, you can't talk to the board. You got to talk to me. And so I said, well, we're not going to do that again. I said, the only thing that's changed since the last time I talked to you is the number of people who've lost their jobs, the number of people who've been killed, and the time that's been wasted. And that's the last time I've ever talked to the Arkansas Trucking Association. That was June of 2024.
An association's name that would make you believe that they are kind of responsible for safeguarding American trucking jobs.
Yeah. And so
Go ahead.
And so a couple of months goes by, I'm still getting up and talking. So I got invited to speak at an immigration meeting in Faulkner County. They had they had put together just a special format for that.
Yep, I know the three ladies that did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they asked me to come speak. I spoke at that, and there were a lot of representatives and a lot of senators there. And that was where I got to meet Representative Wayne Long. Wayne was there. He heard my speech, heard me talk about the issue. Again, we don't know what seeds are being sown when we're doing stuff, but the Lord's always working. And it was about probably 2 or 3 weeks after that, I got a phone call from Wayne. He's like, hey, I really like what you were saying. He said, I'm working on this immigration stuff. I'm going to draft a bill. And he drafted the Secure Roads and Safe Trucking Act, House Bill 1569. That was Wayne Long. And so all of that's going on. And I'm at another Saline County Republican Committee meeting. This is right when everything started falling apart for that committee. Probably August, September, somewhere. I mean, there was a lot going on that stuff, separate from all of it. And I'm at a meeting, and Representative R.J. Hawk comes up to me, and he says, hey, I know you're in trucking and you're working on all this stuff. He said, I've got a trucking bill. Well, as soon as he said, I've got a trucking bill, I knew where the bill. I knew RJ didn't write a trucking bill. He's a radio DJ, you know. And so they had already told me they had a bill, so I knew what the bill was. And I said, "Well, will you send it to me? I'd love to take a look at it." He sends me the bill. Here was the bill. So I'm up speaking about drivers not speaking English, drivers not having U.S. commercial driver's license, not being trained, not being qualified, not being vetted. He sends me a bill. Doesn't say anything about English proficiency, doesn't say anything about what it did talk about the Mexican drivers, but it had specific language in there that jumped off the page to me just as soon as I opened it, and it was to change Arkansas state law that currently said that you had to have a United States or a Canadian commercial driver's license in order to drive on our highways. They had stricken U.S. or Canadian, and they had added in that you could have a non-domicile commercial learner's permit from any foreign jurisdiction. Now, prior to that day, that opening that PDF, I had never heard the words non-domicile anything. CDL, or learner's permit.
Mm-hmm.
I had been specifically focused on the Mexican and Canadian drivers,
Right.
and the B1s. And so it's like, what is a non-domicile commercial learner's permit? You know, and why would we allow anybody from any foreign jurisdiction? Like, what is this? You know, so I quickly, you know, matter of fact, you know, like, no, I want to make the roads safer. I don't know what this is. And anyway, we got in this back and forth, and that devolved real quickly into nothing. And so I just said, look, we're not going to be supportive of that. We're going to go our own path.
What was that bill number? Do you
House
remember?
Bill 1745.
Oh. You know who the sponsors of that bill was?
That was R.J. Hawk. At the time, it was R.J. Hawk. It was a draft. They had drafted that for special committee, or for special session.
Mm.
That was in 2024. They thought this thing was so important that they had to have it in a special session. You know, and
For
non-domiciles,
non-domicile.
to make it legal for non-domicile CDLs from any foreign jurisdiction. Why you got to have a bill like that in a special session? And so if you look at the original draft, anyway, everybody knows we ended up not having a special session in the second half of that year. And so come around the beginning of 25, we get to file House Bill 1569, Wayne Long does. And as soon as that bill gets filed, RJ files 1745 with a co-sponsor, and that co-sponsor in the Senate was Kim Hammer.
Mm.
Okay, let me get that right. Kim Hammer co-sponsored a bill to make it okay to have non-domiciled
Learner's
permit
from any foreign jurisdiction. That's right.
Driving these 80,000-pound trucks up and down our roads, and there was no requirement for English proficiency.
That's right.
But they're non-domicile. That's really interesting because he went head against our efforts for non-domicile people, helping get signatures for a countywide referendum. And they've said, you got to be an Arkansas resident. You cannot have foreign people coming in here getting signatures. But yet,
they weren't foreign people. They were American citizens from other states coming in here.
Right. Exactly. These were citizens from American citizens.
Those you can't come from Texas, but you can come from India.
Right.
That's okay.
It's okay to come down. Anyway, I just thought that was ironic. Go ahead. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Well, not only that, but there's now this vocal contention about this non-domicile language. There's another bill. There's a contested bill now filed,
mm-hmm.
right? So obviously there's something going on here. So they know that there's truckers saying, "Hey, this isn't right." That we've got illegal aliens driving trucks here. And now I'm going to tell you, I've yet to meet another trucking executive. I now have an organization filled with truck drivers and other entrepreneurs like me, guys with 1,000 trucks, 700 trucks, 600, well-experienced, tenured professionals, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The guys that should know. None of them have ever hired anybody with a non-domicile CDL
mm-hmm.
or a non-domicile learner's permit. None of my members, okay?
Yeah. Probably never even heard of it.
Nor had they heard of it
mm-hmm.
prior to all this happening, okay? Nor have any of them come and applied for jobs with them, okay? So when this came about, when 1745 got filed, when 1569 got filed, not even industry experts knew what a non-domicile CDL was, much less the American public, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so I at this time, in January 20, I'm learning, like, what is a non-domicile CDL? Who's got these things? How's this possible? We're hearing from drivers that our roads are filled with a bunch of guys that don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still thinking it's all coming from Mexico and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a good understanding. So one of the guys in our group, Cliff Bates, says, well, let's go find a way to see how many of these non-domiciled CDLs have been issued. How do we figure that out? And so he wasn't a trucker, but he's a numbers guy. And so I pointed to a couple of locations and said, man, please go, happy hunting, And so he went on this website. It's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. It's a page called AI. It's the only publicly available repository of information to tell you how many CDLs are out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only one. So he went and conducted an audit and did a report. He come in my office with just flabbergasted look, like, oh my gosh, So one of the things that we did initially is I sent him to go count, And I sent a FOIA request to the Arkansas Highway Police and said, I want to see every inspection for the trucks that you pulled over for the months of September and October 2024 in the state of Arkansas. And they sent me 20,000 records. They pull over a lot of trucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I took and analyzed all that data and found that there was an anomaly in the data that truck drivers from California, Illinois, and New York and Florida had an unusual amount of market share concentration for freight coming through the state of Arkansas. In other words, how would it make sense that a guy from Long Beach, California could compete with a guy from the Ozarks of Arkansas when it comes to cost of living and living standards?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How's that? How is it that a guy in Chicago and New York, Miami, and LA are the ones that can compete with John from Conway or Shannon from Benton? Like, it doesn't make sense. Historically, Arkansas's always been a hub for trucking.
Yes, it has.
Why? Because
Centrally
of our
located.
demographics. Because we're a rural state. We've got people that live outside of the city. They have a lower cost of living than these people with these high county and city and state taxes in these metropolises. And so we've always had that advantage. Well, now all of a sudden, LA's got that advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually created an infographic that said, what is it that gives these states an advantage over us? And I knew what my assumption was. They're cheating on immigration.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I created that. Sure enough, he comes back with his data, exactly what we thought. Over the last 10 years, 1.3 million truck drivers have been added to the rolls. Of that, 876,000 were added in 10 states, and all of them were added in spurts of like 100,000. So it was statistical anomalies.
There was an organization filtering them in.
It was the hockey stick charts.
Mm-hmm.
It's not linear. It should have been linear. It has to be linear because you have to go to school.
Yeah.
And so the schools can only have so much throughput. They can only train so many people. They can only process so many licenses. Right. And if you're going to grow the number that you're giving out, then you got to staff up those people.
Right.
You don't go. It doesn't hockey stick. So anyway, so we see those anomalies, and sure enough, it's these 10 states. And guess where they are? It's California. It's New York. The data supports exactly what we're already seeing in the inspections. So anyway, so we get all that, and we start showing up. Actually, we called a meeting. With the chair of transportation at in the state legislature. Got Arkansas State Police, Arkansas Highway Police, lawyers from Arkansas DOT, everybody in a room. We've got our lobbyists that we had hired to push 1569. We get them in the room. We've got all of our poster boards. They're like, okay, let's hear. Arkansas Trucking Association was invited to this meeting, not by me, but by the chair of transportation. They didn't show. So we get in the room, and we get to give them this present. What I'm telling y'all now, we get to give them with all the data.
Right.
And they're like, oh my goodness. And they turn and like, is this true? Is this true? You've got the legislators in there asking the state police agencies, yeah, it's bad. We've got all kinds of problems with these guys that don't speak English, but we don't have any tools. We don't have any way of doing anything about it. In fact, and let me tell you, I really respect the Arkansas State Police. Mm-hmm. I think Hager's doing a great job, a fantastic job. In fact, of all the people that I talked to when I was working on this, I went and sat down with Hager and Ron Casey, and I said, here's the issue. Me and Harvey both sat down with them, and those guys appreciated it. I truly believe they wanted to help, but the commercial motor vehicles are not their jurisdiction. It's not there's a different agency for that. That's
right.
That's the highway police.
Right.
But even Hagar said, Shannon, if you can pull a rabbit out of your hat, you've got my support. And so through all of this, he's been supportive.
Well, you can't, look, I'm a big supporter of Arkansas State Police. My dad's retired Arkansas State Police.
Yeah.
So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I do have a question real quick. Who wrote the bill? This one, 1569. That was
1569 was the one written by Wayne Long.
Okay, and that's the one that's got everything y'all wanted in it.
Yes.
But that was after or at the same time the 1745, House Bill 1745 for R.J. Hawks?
1745 had already been written, and they were working on it when we got up and started speaking. So they were already in motion to get the non-domiciles approved. So where'd that come from? Who asked them? Who asked the ARC? That's the question.
Yeah, who wrote that bill?
Yeah. Who wrote House Bill 17? RJ is a disc jockey. He doesn't know anything about truck. He did not write House Bill. Somebody had him write 1745.
If you were to guess, who would that be?
The Arkansas Trucking Association.
Okay.
Because they remember, they called me and said, we're working on a bill.
Right. Right.
We're working on a bill.
And then they went out and found 2 sponsors.
They went out and found 2 sponsors. That's right.
Tim Hammer and RJ Hawks.
That's right.
Okay, in order to get it passed. So now we're in 2025, and you're trying to get your bill done, and now you've had this meeting, and what came out of the meeting you had with all these?
We've got to do something about this. We've got to do something about this. As a matter of fact, he said, I don't want us leaving this room till we come up with a plan of what we're going to do. This was one of the legislators and everybody. So we leave that meeting on cloud 9. Man, all right, there's good reception. Everybody got the issue. Like, we're going to go out here. It's going to get fixed. It's going to get solved. No, we walk out and I guess the phone calls were made. I don't know, but it's like we're not going to advance that. We're not going to advance that legislation because it violates so many different federal laws. It's all preempted. It's all federal. It's a federal issue, not state issue. It's federal. And if we start stepping on their toes, they're going to pull all of our federal money. They're going to pull Donald Trump and Secretary Sean Duffy is going to pull their money for enforcing laws on illegal alien truck drivers. That's what they wanted everybody to believe. And so that's why the bill never got to go before committee. It never got to be heard in committee.
It's who it benefits. It's the picking and choosing because marijuana's federally illegal, has been for a while, but the states were okay with claiming sovereignty and doing that. But when it comes to protecting Americans' jobs, Arkansans' jobs, they don't want to do that.
Well, what's ironic about all that now is if you look at what's going on, and so now that issue, that fight turned into a national battle that got Donald Trump to issue an executive order. It got Duffy to issue an interim final ruling, and so it kind of evolved out of there. But what's coming now is Duffy's not doing enough, Trump's not doing enough. So now, guess what? All states are doing something. Tennessee's got bills right now. Florida's got bills. Arizona's got bills. Oklahoma's got bills. So it's.
Well, you said about Oklahoma, and I want you to share that with the audience because you said the exact verbiage you used on the bill that Wayne Long came up with, 1569, that you used that same language in Oklahoma.
That's right.
And they passed it.
The governor supported it. The House supported it. The Senate supported it. Everybody was like, absolutely, this makes sense. But guess who the only opposition was in Oklahoma?
The Trucking
Association.
Wow.
Again, they tried to railroad us in Oklahoma. In fact, it got so dirty, we had some whistleblowers come forward with the information and emails and stuff that was going on between the Oklahoma Trucking Association and D.C. So the Oklahoma Trucking Association was getting their marching orders to fight us from the American Trucking Association in Washington, D.C. And that guy ended up resigning and lost his job over all this, the president of the Oklahoma Trucking Association, because the legislators and all the trucking companies there were like, what are you doing fighting this? This is exactly what we need. And so they went past him, and they ended up passing SB 20. But they even went further than that. And here's the real game changer. SB 20 has been great, but you can't get anything done without enforcement.
SB Senate Bill 20 in Oklahoma. Okay.
It got passed and got made into law. The governor signed it in. In fact, he was so proud of it, he had a signing ceremony just for that bill, for SB 20. That's the stark contrast there.
Right. Here in Arkansas, they can't even get a committee.
They can't even get a committee. The governor in Oklahoma has a signing ceremony for it.
Right. Yeah, and we're supposed to be a solid red state here in Arkansas. Yeah. Okay.
But one of the big breakthroughs in Oklahoma was the buy-in from the highway police, the DOT, and their cooperation with ICE. And so after SB 20 got passed, I guess the highway police there in Oklahoma come to one of the summit. We put on a summit in Oklahoma City, invited all the trucking companies in, invited all the law enforcement in, and gave a briefing on this issue. ICE was at that meeting. ICE was there and DPS was there, and they signed a 287 agreement, 287G, to work together.
What is a 287G agreement?
This is so important. This is important for our city municipalities. This is important for our county officers and for all of our state agencies. None of them can enforce immigration law because it's federal, right? When you sign a 287G agreement with ICE, they deputize your officers to enforce federal law. And so all of our cities, all of our counties, all of our state police can be enforcing immigration law if they sign 287G agreements. And they should. I think every one of our agencies should be doing that right now, given the scope of the problem.
Right.
And so Oklahoma did that. And as soon as they do that, they plan to have an operation. They have their first operation. It's called Operation Guardian. They had it at the western port of Oklahoma on Interstate 40. And they said, okay, we're just going to see how bad this problem really is. This is right after SB 20 passes. They go wide. It's like 2 weeks after that meeting. They go out there. They stop 500 trucks, make all of them come in the weigh station. Okay? They check everybody's documentation, all their paperwork. So historically, Arkansas Highway Police, Oklahoma Highway Police only asked for the CDL. And they would assume, rightfully so, as most of us would, if they give me a CDL, they must have lawful status. Somebody gave them a CDL.
Yeah.
Right.
So they've never gone past that. They've never gone
Why
past
would you?
that. Right. Yeah. They assume everything's on the up and up. Oklahoma didn't. They said, all right, now we're going to go, give me your CDL. Now, where were you born? Let me see your passport. Let me see your birth certificate. And so they started asking those questions and going past that layer as they were trained in their deputization of that 287G with ICE. So there's a whole process there. I don't know what the training is, but you understand what I'm saying. They went past. They went deeper. 120 out of the 500 trucks were illegal aliens, with most of them having United States commercial driver's license. And guess what states gave them to them?
California,
Illinois, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, all the states that we had already identified.
Right. Do you know if Governor Huckabee Sanders has, let ICE? Has she come in and help?
She has not commented on this, not one time through all of this. There's not been any comment.
Do they? What agencies in Arkansas have signed that agreement that you know of?
The only one I know of, because they're my jurisdictions, are the Saline County Sheriff's Department has signed a 287G, and the Arkansas State Police has signed a 287G.
So state police can do it, but not the
highway police.
Not the highway police.
Yeah.
And you said earlier that that's not the jurisdiction of the state police.
Right. We need the Arkansas Highway Police to sign not just sign a 287G, sign it and then enforce immigration law. If they will start, if they will start asking immigration questions of these truck drivers, you will be shocked at how many trucks they will pull off these Arkansas highways. But it will make our highways safer. These guys are here. They've been issued. So that non-domicile CDL, let me explain how they get that.
Yeah.
They sneak across our southern border, all of them. Of the operation in Oklahoma, Guardian, you can go back and hear the commissioner say, of all of the drivers that they arrested, all of them came across the southern border within the last 2 to 3 years. So they snuck across the southern border. They went into these sanctuary cities where they have sanctuary immigration judges, and the immigration judges give them EAD cards, employment authorization documents. They take that EAD card and they immediately go apply for a CDL. We've got guys, the difference between the issuance of the EAD card by the immigration judge and the day that they were issued a CDL is 5 days.
Wow.
5 days.
Wow.
No training whatsoever.
Big problem, big safety problem in America. That's why most people with their attention came to this when in Florida, the truck driver that did a U-turn right there on the interstate, and the car smashed in and killed. That was when it really got everybody's attention.
The reason the Florida crash caught so much attention was the day before that crash, the United States Department of Transportation was in a meeting. So the day before that crash was the signing ceremony for SB 20 in Oklahoma. And on that same day, US DOT staff were in Oklahoma City meeting with us, and we were giving them a 4.5-hour presentation on the scope of the problem.
Wow.
And so as they were flying back to Washington, D.C., Florida happened. And DOT knew what to ask about, and they dug into all the details, and it exploded. And that's why since that time, too, now people are asking, when these crashes happen, they're asking all the right questions.
Right. Well, go ahead.
But then you get Americans that want to be truck drivers, and they pay to go to the school. They pay thousands of dollars to get their CDL, but then there's no jobs available for them when they get done because they're going to some non-domicile.
And I wouldn't encourage anyone in the current state of the industry to go be a truck driver. Truck driving has always been a good foundation. My dad used to always say, his saying was, son, you can always drive a truck. You know, you can go chase your dream, go do this. But if all that fails, keep your CDL, because you can always drive a truck and pay the bills.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, if you're trained and you've got your license, it's something you can fall back on. But it's also a great thing for bringing people back into the community, getting people back to work, and it's always been a great job for a blue collar man to take care of his family and be able to support his wife and his kids. And now, what's happened over the last 4 years is you're competing with people that are happy living in their truck. They never have to get home to their wife and children. They stay out all the time, and so they've made it into indentured servitude. And so they've taken what was a good job and made it slavery. Yep. And so I wouldn't encourage anyone. As a matter of fact, I have, I work in ministry. I love on people. It's not exactly a ministry, but I try to pray with men all the time and to help men that are trying to get back into the community through rehabilitation or whatever that program is. And we've got a group in Benton called Verses. It's a Friday morning Bible study every Friday morning, but there's people that always come into that group, and they're looking to get back plugged into the society. They're looking for a job. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I just got out of this drug court or whatever, and I'm gonna go now, and I want to go get CDL training, and I'm looking to get into a career. And so I have people come to me all the time saying, I want to be a truck driver, and I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't right now, because it's not what it used to be. Yeah. And we've got to get back to that. We've got to get back to where it is a great place that we can send people, say, yes, we need to immediately get you back over here, get you training, and get you back in a truck and get you back on your feet.
So what do we need to do in Arkansas now then in order to get us back on the right track? Obviously the bill, the 1569 that y'all wrote, was passed in Oklahoma, Senate Bill 20. Or is that going to be looked at again, or
Absolutely.
Are you going to push it again?
Oh, we're going to fight them. They haven't seen that was the pregame.
What about broadening the scope? Because I mean, your industry has been devastated by this, but so have others.
I've actually got a list of things here. Let me grab it real quick. But we've got a whole host of things now. That scope has widened greatly.
Good.
And so, the 287G is the most impactful thing that we can do right now without a session, right? Because all it takes is a state agency signing up for it and deputizing officers enforcing it.
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they won't. But
somebody need to ask the governor that. Why isn't she doing that?
We're on a campaign right now, so we keep releasing badge cam videos that shows that our Arkansas highway police officers are stopping drivers every day that don't speak English, and they're never asking any immigration questions. They're never asking, to see that visa.
You're forwarding that information constantly?
Yeah, that's right.
Is the numbers going up or down?
Arkansas is doing a good job on enforcing the English proficiency out of service violation, but they're not asking any immigration questions. And they need to be going into, now that we know that we have an immigration problem, now that we know that all of these drivers are not only not speaking English, they were never trained, they were never qualified, and they were never vetted.
Well, they're here illegally.
They're illegal. They shouldn't be in the truck, period.
Right.
This hits every point on the president's agenda, though. Immigration, jobs for Americans, bringing business back. So why isn't Arkansas leading the way on this?
The president signed an executive order calling for an investigation in the non-domicile CDLs. The Secretary of Transportation, as a result of that request, found that he said his exact words were, the claims are absolutely true, 100% true, the system is broken. And he admitted that they've all been issued illegally. And so the president has already taken action on it. Now it's up to the states to button it up and tighten up the system. Because it requires state law enforcement officers to enforce the law.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's federal regulations coming out of the FMCSA, but they are relying on state police through their power. They've delegated their power down to Arkansas Highway Police to enforce commercial motor vehicle law.
Withhold their federal funding.
Exactly.
Well, you could federal funding for roads. You could do that right off the bat. But anyway, this is really enlightening. I'm glad that you came in because I really wanted to know more about this topic, and I think most of the people who are listening to this program right now have just learned a great deal from you about how all of this has worked and what we need to do to get ahead of it. Now, you said other states around us. Oklahoma's not the only one.
Yeah.
What are the other states that have moved forward with this bill?
Yeah, so the leadership in the Tennessee Senate right now is putting forward legislation. They're attacking it from an insurance perspective. Their bill currently says that if you use an illegal alien truck driver on anything in their state and they're involved in a motor vehicle accident, that the truck driver has to, or the motor carrier, the company, has to accept fault in the accidents, and they're automatically assessed
That's a good one.
a minimum of $1 million in punitive damages.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing that kind of stuff go on all across the country. Florida right now, they're putting a $50,000 fine to the company for using an illegal alien truck driver if they're caught.
That seems like such an easy win.
It is. It absolutely is. And so
They should make it 100,000.
yeah,
They should make it so painful that they, again, you got to get rid of these employers. Got to quit hiring these people and putting them on the road. It seems like to me, and the way to do that is punish them financially.
that's right. Well, we're still calling for a complete ban on the non-domicile CDL, and that's because one of the things that we've learned through this whole process, again, we didn't know what it was, so we had to go through our own due diligence on all of this. What we found was the non-domicile CDL was never created from statutory law. It's a loophole in regulation. And so the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration created a regulation that allowed the non-domicile CDL to be issued to foreign jurisdictions. What they meant it for was for a guy from Arkansas can go to Mississippi, and even though he is domiciled, he lives in Arkansas, he could get a Mississippi CDL. And that got contorted in D.C. by rule makers, not lawmakers, okay? And in 2019, they issued guidance. They didn't even do rulemaking. They issued guidance.
So there's no legislation supporting it.
No, none.
It's just a
So we don't have to
directive.
tolerate any of it. We don't have to tolerate any of it. So we're calling for, Arkansas should say, we want a ban on it. You don't send us any of your non-domicile CDLs because it was never statutory. And it's not even a rule. It's guidance. And so their guidance said, it's crazy. It's absolutely insane. Their guidance said,
It's infuriating.
in 2019 that, hey, you can start issuing CDLs to people with EAD cards. So the reason this is a new phenomenon is they expanded the guidance in 19 to include EAD cards, and EAD cards is the nuclear weapon that they use to give to all these people crossing the southern border.
all the sanctuary cities. Yeah, right. Got it.
So everybody's got one. Everybody's got one of these EAD cards because the sanctuary cities were just passing them out.
Yep.
Horrible, but we're going to get it fixed. We're going to have to. We got to put some light on this, and we've intended to do that. What are you going to do as the Secretary of State to make that happen?
Well, we talked a little bit about before. I don't have legislative authority or anything like that, but bureaucracy can be a tool that gets used both ways, right? And investigations cost money, audits cost money, checking in on businesses cost money, and I mean, how many times do you want to put up with that? Looking through, and then what else? You remember this from the military, right? The moment you find one deficiency, then you start digging deeper. And then what else are you going to find, right? So that could be just one way to where we come and just start looking at stuff, but then what else are we going to find in that process?
It takes one
right?
kid to go to a couple of child care centers in Minnesota and to find out a whole host of problems.
I'm not
there.
going to start any child care centers.
Well, I mean, I think Mr. Hammer, the sponsor here, was one of the ones. He's got a child care center. But regardless, folks, we got problems, and we got problems here in Arkansas, and it's not just in Arkansas. It's probably across the board in many other states. And so, when you see a problem like this, we've got to fix it. We got to start right here in our own backyard. We need to get Governor Sanders on board with this, and we need other legislators. And Kim Hammer, who was a co-sponsor of this, is running for Secretary of State. Remember that when it comes time to vote. He was a co-sponsor of this bill to make sure that these non-domicile people, illegals, can drive trucks here on Arkansas roads.
One of the things I want to do is I want to work intimately with this gentleman and his organization and find out as much, get smart on it as best I can, and then have all you other smart people figure out ways that the Secretary of State's office could assist in whatever way that would be possible. I don't know what that looks like, but I bet we could come up with something.
Shannon, where would people go to learn more about this?
You can go to our website at www.americantruckers.com. Or you can visit us on any social media. Our tag is @ATU Truckers.
It's AmericanTruckersUnited.com or
No.
AmericanTruckers.com.
That's another God thing. I mean, what's the odds of me being able to buy the website AmericanTruckers.com? But that's our website, AmericanTruckers.com.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Well, I encourage everybody to go read and get smart about a subject before you start talking about it, because most people have no clue about this.
No.
They won't take much to be smarter than the next guy.
No.
You know, but there's a lot of information here, a lot of things that we've covered. Any other closing arguments? We've got about a minute left.
I'm just wondering how many other businesses and industries across the state and nation are affected as much as you that we haven't heard about. I mean, I see it where I am, especially in the agricultural industry. If you go up and down a delta, it's South Africans. You go up around me, it's Hispanics and stuff from South America. And then depending on where else you go in the nation, you hear about these issues. But man, I feel for my countrymen.
Yeah, I do too. How about you, Shannon? Anything you want to leave us with? You got about 30 seconds.
Well, with that
40 seconds.
point, I think that, the biggest thing is they messed with an industry that's dangerous, and so the reason it's got such a spotlight on it right now, unlike other trades that are probably having the same problem, is because people get killed in my industry. And so if they're going to mess with something, this should have been the last thing they messed with.
Yeah.
Well, whenever I'm on the road and I'm passing big 18-wheeler, you think of professional drivers.
Yeah.
These guys know what they've been, they're on the road all the time. They understand what's going on, and you just believe that they've gone through extra training to be able to drive these big trucks, and that's a huge weapon, and really. And so anyway, thank you so much for coming
You bet.
and sharing the
Glad to be here.
story.
It was awesome.
We really appreciate that here on the Kernel of Truth. We've got a lot more shows in the future, ladies and gentlemen. Brian, I know that you're running for Secretary of State. I just
sir.
want people to understand that this is a good man, and he's got his heart in it,
Thank
and
you.
he can absolutely be a benefit to every Arkansan. And I think you ought to really consider him this primary on March 3rd. Thank you for joining our show.
Thanks for having me, Colonel.
Shannon, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next time on the Kernel of Truth.